China has what I consider to be the most capitalistic economy in the world. Despite the communist label, it's a label. Forget about it, ignore it, don't repeat it all the time. It operates with astonishing efficiency. Transaction costs are minimal, making goods and services not just cheaper, but increasingly of higher quality, sometime meeting Japanese and German standards. And I think these days, mostly meeting German and Japanese standards. They have taken Kaizen, the Japanese concept of Kaizen, to heart. They are keen learners. They absorb new ideas. They absorb them quickly. They adopt them, they adapt them, and they institutionalize them. And without backsliding, they continue to improve. In China, from Chinese government's point of view, if you don't work, you go hungry. For them, it's that simple. It's not a communist country in that sense at all. Some dismiss China as merely copying. Hey, if you could copy the whole of Africa, Latin America, the Indian subcontinent would be as rich as China. China is 5 or 10 times richer than these hellholes. Copying is not easy. Copying is a tough job.
大家好，今天要分享的是印度人恨之入骨的公知贾扬特·班达里今年8月在加拿大一场哲学研讨会上演讲的节选。2010年，贾扬特带着印度政府授予的杰出海外印裔的光环和打拼20年攒下的2亿美金，信心满满回母国印度创业。没想到印度的营商环境完完全全就是个杀猪盘，2亿美金血本无归。从此，贾扬特开启印黑模式，每天6小时，日均发布12条恨印小作文，把印度上上下下骂得体无完肤。可能是因为他名下的科技公司今年加速布局中国市场，这位讲话风格直白大胆的骂神也开始频频为中国点赞，似乎成了一枚标准的中吹。不过你听他里里外外夸中国，可千万先别迷糊。这篇演讲听到后面会让你听得一愣一愣的，大跌眼镜。你会发现，原来这位印裔公知脑海里有这么多关于中国的暴论。我们来看看他在演讲中是怎么说的。
I have been visiting China for the last 16 years, often multiple times a year, sometimes for extended days. This year, I have spent more than half of so far of this year in China, traveling to big cities, small cities, villages. I have, over this time, come to see China not through ideology or media narratives, but through my own deep experiences, interacting with companies, locals, street vendors, bureaucrats. I have, what I'm going to talk about is based on what I have seen, what I have experienced, and what I have heard. Much of what people in the West believe about China is just untrue. It amazes me no end how persistently and deeply people across the political spectrum hold negative images of China. I suspect Washington's propaganda has seeped into the minds not only of leftists and hawks, but even of thoughtful conservatives and libertarians. Because they often repeat the same cliches. Chinese, as I have experienced, are inward-looking and focused, not expansionists. They are not looking for a war, not the average citizen. They are not threatening. You want to have a fight with Chinese, he wants to find a way out of it. I have found their society to be more curious than they get credit for. They are not as censorious as many people think them to be. Contrary to popular perception, they are very open-minded. At least the ones I have come across are very open-minded. Students, private company workers, or even bureaucrats. They are self-critical and they are reasonably truthful. And when I say reasonably truthful, you have to understand that 2/3 of the world's population has no clue what the word truth means. I did not know what the word truth meant until I was in my early 20s, until the time I arrived in the UK. So Chinese are reasonably truthful. Now, yes, if I ask them about Tibet or Xinjiang, or if I want them to criticize, if I incite them to criticize Xi Jinping, they will probably avoid confrontation on that subject. Now, I'm quoting statements of two people in this audience, and this is what, in my view, so no offense to everyone, but I'm just highlighting the influence of the media narrative. A friend asked me if I've ever been worried about being arrested in China. Another one asked me if I have ever been followed in China. And I have been, as I said, to many parts of China. I seriously doubt it. I have been followed in Myanmar. Military intelligence followed me. I was arrested in Zimbabwe because I was taking some forbidden photographs. I have traveled with insurgents in Laos. I have traveled by myself just alone in the ungovernable parts of Congo. I have been close to 100 countries. I have traveled with the state operatives in North Korea. I can usually tell when I'm followed. I don't think I have been followed in China. Just about a year or maybe 2 years back, I decided to walk around a very controversial mosque in a village in China. We had stopped over and I decided I just wanted to take a walk around it. I even went inside it. An hour later, a police car showed up to look for this brown-colored, Arabic-looking guy. And because they had failed to trace me to a hotel. I was not registered in a hotel. I won't tell you the details. So he came over and asked me for my passport. I declined to show it to him. And I told him, why should I? I'm not crossing the border. I am within China and well within China that you have no reason to ask me for my passport. This young officer understood my question and the implications that I was, the underlying issue with that question. And he said, that's perfectly fine. Show me an ID because the Chinese law requires you to have an ID all the time with you. Of course, I did not have a Chinese ID. He behaved with me professionally and politely. Eventually, after some discussion, I showed him a PDF copy of my passport on my cell phone. He took a photo of my passport, apologized, and he told me I should never have been asked to show my passport, and he moved on. Now, ironically, in the statist world we live in, this, in absolute term, was of course unpleasant, but it was no worse than and perhaps even milder than what I have experienced in many countries, including in Canada or Germany. I have been asked for passport twice by plain-dressed people who claimed to be policemen to show my ID cards in Germany. So nothing special about China. You can, in isolation, nitpick on things to do with China and show it in bad light. Now, in China and elsewhere in the Far East, people are very careful about publicly voicing their political opinions. So this kind of seminar is probably not going to work out in China. I have, however, never in my 16, 20 years of traveling in Far East Asia ever heard of someone getting a knock at 2 a.m. in the morning, hooded by the police and taken away to an unknown location. I have talked with people about what happens when someone crosses a political line. Usually what happens, and this has always been the case, a call starts from the higher authority. It distills down to your immediate supervisor, and he will calmly explain to you what your limitations are not too different from what you have in North America, unfortunately. If you express certain political views in North America on race, sex, Amy Wax talked about it, you risk being cancelled. And indeed, I have been cancelled. I was cancelled from a Frankfurt-based mining conference because I was deemed to be homophobic and sexist. Those were not intelligent enough to blame me for racism, which is what they should have done, actually, had they thought things properly. China has what I consider to be the most capitalistic economy in the world. Despite the communist label, it's a label. Forget about it, ignore it, don't repeat it all the time. It operates with astonishing efficiency. Transaction costs are minimal, making goods and services not just cheaper, but increasingly of higher quality, sometime meeting Japanese and German standards. And I think these days, mostly meeting German and Japanese standards. It boggles my mind no end that China is not a micronation. It's not Monaco or Singapore. It is the biggest, among the biggest countries on the planet. But it boggles my mind no end that despite this, despite the fact that from your underwear to the high-tech equipment here, most of things have been manufactured in China. Many people think China is a paper tiger. And if at all they accept the growth story of China, they credit it to dictatorship. So they basically want to make their claim unfalsifiable, if I use that scientific term. They just don't want to accept that China is growing, progressing, and improving, irrespective of what evidence I show them. In much of the third world, and I don't like this purchasing power parity concept in economics. In much of the third world, yes, I can buy cheap food, but there's a difference between cheap food made on a street corner and good food made in a high-class restaurant kitchen in Switzerland. I don't like PPP measurements, but when I go to a third world country and if I want a Western kind of lifestyle, I don't pay less. I actually pay more because Western lifestyle in a third world country actually becomes more expensive, not cheaper, contrary to what purchasing power parity might tell you. China is a rare exception. I love it. I can get Western quality services, or much better actually, for a third or fifth of price that I would pay in a Western country. It is not unusual for me to pay just $50 for accommodation in a nice 5-star hotel with 2 buffet breakfasts included. This is not unusual in a tier 3 city in China. In fact, last year I was transiting through Guangzhou and I had booked a nice hotel, and I know it's hard to believe. I paid $10 for my overnight accommodation, personal pickup, personal drop-off to the airport, and a buffet breakfast. So you can imagine that they are trying to make money from that $50 or $10. You can imagine the efficiency of that country. Taxis cost you a fraction of what you would pay anywhere else. In most cities, when I take taxis, the cars are amazing. And I ask them often, how good are these cars? How long have you run them? And they often say, without a problem for the last 2 years. And I pay a couple of dollars from going from one part of the city to another part. They are so cheap. Banks are open during the weekends, sometimes late in the night. I understand there are people working and they are not, they maybe don't want to go home. I'm talking about at least one side of the equation. Renminbi maintains almost a parity with US dollar. It's not fixed, but it's close to a parity. But the bank deposit rates are better in China. Now, in these 16 years, I cannot think of many occasions when I was cheated. In fact, I can think of only once that I was overcharged by a taxi when I tried to take a taxi in Beijing from the nightlife area. People drink too much and the taxi drivers use that as a reason to make money. In 16 years, once. In these 16 years, the transformation in China has been staggering. When I first arrived in China in 2010, actually the same year that I started this seminar, I went out in Shanghai to search for coffee. And I found something barely drinkable. It was watery, really couldn't be drunk. Today, forget Shanghai. I can go to tier 3 city, and the range of coffees available easily surpass that found in Germany, Switzerland, or France. You get really top quality coffees in China. Likewise, I thought until recently that Canada had the best and tastiest fruit. But flying over China, you see miles and miles of greenhouses. They have erupted, they have mushroomed in many parts of China. The scale and quality of domestic agriculture has improved so quickly that Chinese, in my view, today produce the best fruit anywhere. This is what I think about the Chinese character. They have taken Kaizen, the Japanese concept of Kaizen, to heart. They are keen learners. They absorb new ideas. They absorb them quickly. They adopt them, they adapt them, and they institutionalize them. And without backsliding, they continue to improve. China keeps ratcheting up. And when they do something worth adopting, it swiftly becomes a part of their culture. This is amazing. You try educating and doing good things to third world people. Otherwise, they slip back right away. They go back to their prior existence in no time. China keeps ratcheting up. I think this is the key to their success. One image, which is hardwired in my mind. I was in Changsha just by myself, walking around the museum, Changsha is a city not too far from Wuhan, a few months before COVID hit. And I was sitting on a bench, and this old woman who was a janitor. Now, of course, in China, is not communist. It's not a welfare state. If you don't have money, you go hungry, so you better work. This relatively old woman climbed up a pole to brush off dust off that pole. I was mesmerized watching her. I have that video and photograph with me. I use it sometimes in my presentation. That image is hardwired in me. She didn't have to do it. I don't know if I would have done it in her shoes. But that is, for whatever reason, their system works. Either they take pride in their work, or the structure of their organizations is such that people at least show that they are proud of what they are doing. Now, as I said, I come from a hellhole. I grew up in a horrible hellhole. Hellhole is probably not the right word for the place I grew up in. But those people where I grew up, they constantly say that we supply the CEOs to the US. I grew up in India, of course. You should never, ever judge a society based on the highest IQ people from that society or the most successful people of that society, because you are not looking at an average. You are statistically wrong at looking at just the high IQ smart people or rich people. What I assess a country based on is their average people. And this janitor, in my hardwired information, it tells me what an average Chinese I have seen to be. From what I see in China, and of course this is partly as a tourist, I have never worked in China. I am, of course, a business traveler or just a traveler or even a backpacker when I was 16 years back. I don't see any sense of whining among those people. So when I stop a janitor to ask her something, she smiles back and responds to me. Unlike welfare, people we have, there's a class that we have managed in the Western world, which is whiners, which is entitled, and which always holds a victim card. In China, from Chinese government's point of view, if you don't work, you go hungry. For them, it's that simple. It's not a communist country in that sense at all. And I'm all for that ethic. I have been hungry, broke. Rick has known me when I was pretty broke. I have been broke and hungry. And I think the best education any young guy can ever get is to not have money. It teaches you to be entrepreneurial and think about providing value to the society. Now, that doesn't mean Chinese people go hungry, because social opprobrium and accountability and family support mixed with accountability, because all compassion and tolerance should come with accountability, takes care of people who don't have jobs, who are disabled, or whatever else. And I think not having the victim mentality and not being given a space to express their sense of entitlement makes them less distracted and happier. I'm talking about the lower class, lower paid people. Now, wages, surprisingly, this is what capitalism should mean. Wages in Hong Kong and China rise and fall with changing economic conditions, which I doubt happens in any other place in the world. You should not be surprised if the officer you go to meet this morning ends up delivering your Amazon delivery kind of thing the same afternoon. He is allowed to hustle a bit on the side if his salary has gone down recently. Now, last year, after the Capitalism and Morality seminar in Vancouver, I flew to Shanghai with a domestic connection. So I flew into Shanghai, I flew into Tokyo, I stayed overnight in Tokyo, I took a flight to Shanghai, and I had an onward domestic flight in China. My flight was about 20 minutes late, with a 20-minute left for connection. There was no way I was going to catch my domestic flight, because the international arrival and domestic departure are two ends of the airport there. I came out very relaxedly because I knew I had missed my flight. When I came out, someone was holding a banner with my name on it. He photographed my boarding pass and me. He photographed my boarding pass and me and said, "Go that way." This is something I have become accustomed to. What comes across as might be a bit blunt is the Chinese way. It's a Chinese and Singaporean way. They are more functional rather than I sit with maybe unnecessary politeness sometimes. Not that I have anything against politeness. Western culture continues to be supreme for me, but I'm just highlighting the negative things that have sunk into the minds of the Western people because of Washington and because of media propaganda. Now I started walking to where he said, and I knew, there would be no one next. I would get lost and eventually lose my flight. There was a chain of agents on the way who knew who I was, and they said, "Go that way, go that way." I was ushered to the top of the line when they needed to, because I still had to do customs and immigration in those 20 minutes. And I made it to my plane in less than 20 minutes. I don't know how to set up an organization like that. I actually don't know how that was achieved. Just to add, I was not flying business class. I was flying economy. So it was not that I was given special privileges because I was flying first class or business class. Now, I have visited government offices in China. They are, again, blunt. You walk in and they want you out very quickly. They want to do your job very, very quickly. The goal is very simple. Do the job and let the citizens go. They don't waste time on pleasantries. If you go to arrive at Singapore airport or Chinese airport or Japanese airport or Korean airport and say, "Good morning," they'll probably not even look at you or not even respond to you. They don't, I'm all for pleasantries. but I'm not for pleasantries with government officers, not with politicians, not with bureaucrats. When dealing with immigration and police, I want an interaction that is brief and not condescending chit-chat. When an immigration officer in America says, hello, how are you? Maybe I don't want to respond to him, but I'm forced to respond, so I don't like that condescending chit-chat. If I can avoid saying hello, I like it. That's what I prefer about China and Singapore. Because my anti-statist principles hold a higher value than politeness. In China, that is exactly what I get. In these 16 years, I have never met a heavy-handed bureaucrat in China, or for that matter in Japan, Korea, Singapore, or Hong Kong. And I have spent extended times in all these countries. Recently, 3 months back, I was driving around with a host and I said, why don't I see those city police officers? These were a different kind of police officers removing street vendors from the street. And his answer was, officers have been given more productive roles. They have demarcated a tacit line between what officers can do and what street vendors can do. At least among the people I have encountered, and I'm talking about a street corner guy to normal people I meet, an average guy or corporate guys I meet, I don't see a fear of police among them. So I have nothing, I'm saying nothing about what happened 30 years or 40 years back in China. I'm talking about today. I simply don't see fear in the eyes of an average citizens when it comes to the government. In fact, I know someone in China who is suing the local police for something. And he or she has no fear of reprisals. Put it simply, everyday systems work in China. People are responsive. Conveniences are real. And despite my negative views on purchasing power parity, things are actually very inexpensive. It has become, strangely over the last 1 or 2 years, extraordinarily safe. People now leave as they do in Singapore, women leave their purses on the table and go away and come back later. That's how safe China has suddenly become. China has dealt with religious extremism. They had Islamic extremism extremely well. I don't see any sign of it anymore. And if this contradicts Western narrative, perhaps it's time to trust my direct experience over the ideological filters I'm required to put on. Now, let me get to some of the principle here. It is commonly believed that pacifists like Mahatma Gandhi, the so-called Mahatma Gandhi, when you get hit, show your other cheek, and that softens the other person. That's not how the world works. The world is very Darwinian. You cannot win a war for civilization without fighting for it. You must fight for civilization. To the limit governments work, they work to the limit that citizens are prepared to stand up and fight. Yes, Chinese fight. There are literally hundreds of thousands of protests in China every year. Western media won't talk about it, but they protest when they need to protest. And I have seen Chinese citizens loudly shouting at their public servants when the time comes. So yes, they fight. Now, once I was driving in southern part of China near Golden Triangle with some people. This is those people who don't know, this is an area long and famous for drug smuggling. Our car was stopped by the police. The only time ever that my car was stopped by the police. Now, China imposes massive penalties for drug offenses. I don't know what they are. You probably don't stay alive for too long. It seems smugglers still take the risk because Why? Why do they take the risk? That is why police has stopped us. My suspicion, talking with people, is that Chinese ports and infrastructure is so efficient that the risk-reward calculus shifts in the minds of smugglers. They prefer to use China. When your logistical ecosystem is as frictionless as China's is, and regulatory framework, even criminals are tempted. Now, the question is, and I've tried to figure this out, does China supply fentanyl to the United States? I don't know. I'm only talking about what I know, what I have experienced in my 16 years. So I asked a successful businessman recently, and I said, does Chinese government enable supply of fentanyl to American citizens? And he said he wouldn't be surprised. Again, this indicates the openness with which people can respond to you. But remember, in this building, you just have to go down 2 blocks or 4 blocks and get a free shot of drugs supplied by the government. So why should you be blaming China for supplying drugs when you supplied free of cost using tax money and government resources? Now, maybe that's the right thing to do. I'm not saying that. All I'm saying is you enable, I think I can get any kind of drugs. I don't consume any drugs within a block from here. So why blame China when Western governments fail themselves? Now, I know, and I'm saying things here which which are assumed not to sit well with Chinese government. I have in my podcasts always mentioned that I consider Hong Kong and Taiwan to be sovereign countries. So I'm not here to please China. I'm here to talk about facts that I have seen. Now, I know Xi Jinping declared himself a lifetime president. I found it repulsive, the same as I'm sure most of you did. But not just because of that, but also because it seemed that he faced no opposition from within his party, which makes you very unsecure about how rapidly things can change. It is claimed, and I don't have anything against it, it's claimed that some of these were eliminated who faced capital punishment under the pretext of corruption charges, because everyone was corrupt 20 years back. But then never judge political leaders in isolation, because political leaders are like that. Here is my view on democracy. John is gone, but here's my view on democracy. Democracy brings into power virtue signalers, demagogues, and incompetents, people who hollow out institutions like termites. Yet, the same governments demand that China open up to democracy and allow foreign-backed protests. Washington, again, talking about government, not the people. Washington incites pro-democracy movements in Hong Kong and Taiwan. And I have experienced that, which I'm soon going to talk about. Would it be then so outrageous if China responded in kind and helped supply fentanyl in response? Well, why do you agitate other people in the first place? 16 years back, after traveling a bit to China, I had a very innovative idea. I thought China was booming. Corruption was booming as a result. Macau had recently exceeded Las Vegas in terms of casino gambling revenue. And it had become a hub for money laundering and whatever else. It became a pleasure center for Chinese who hadn't experienced certain pleasures in life. Construction was everywhere in China. And I had this brilliant idea. I'm an Indian at the end of the day. I thought this corruption money would flow into properties and it would flow into casinos. My clients lost at least 90 to 95% of that money. Some of that went to zero. Casinos disappeared. The property market collapsed. Now, I asked those people, my Chinese contacts who are critical of Z, if what they think about corruption. They all admit that they have not paid a bribe in years, maybe a decade or more. Now, I come from a third world country, and I mentioned in my introduction that for me, the issue is not about socialism or capitalism. For me, the biggest issue is savagery or civilization. And corruption exists at a totally different dimension. It does not deal with the dimension of the spectrum between socialism and capitalism. It's a completely other dimension, which corrodes, which destroys everything. And that is, for me, the biggest reason why China institutionally will continue to improve. Alcohol is very inexpensive in China. For $1, even in a nice restaurant, you would pay $1 or $2 for a big bottle of beer. So alcohol is expensive, inexpensive, including Heineken kind of drinks. And you can drink publicly in China. There's no problem in drinking in public. But surprising things have happened. As time has passed, people drink less and less. So much less that you could go to a $10 or $15 buffet restaurant where alcohol is included in the buffet price. And you hardly ever see people getting drunk. That's how things have changed. Public servants are required not to drink when they are on business. So they can't drink when they are being looked after by private companies or on public work. And I have seen them behaving that way. In fact, that has also come down to private companies. Private companies avoid drinking. You might not agree with the kind of rules China has, but I have come to accept that they have become a country of the rule of law rather than the rule of man, which is the key distinction, even if I don't agree with the rules they have. Some dismiss China as merely copying. Hey, if you could copy the whole of Africa, Latin America, the Indian subcontinent would be as rich as China. China is 5 or 10 times richer than these hellholes. Copying is not easy. Copying is a tough job. Now, it's funny that libertarians and conservatives don't want governments in the Western countries to interfere in the market. But when Chinese Xi Jinping refused to get involved in the property market to support it, and when it was crashing, they were making fun of him that he should have participated in supporting the property market. When corporate lobbies got involved, were asserting themselves in Beijing, they were cut short, and some of those billionaires suffered consequences. Now, maybe I don't agree with how it was done and what was done, but corporations have no business lobbying with the government. Now, look at the social aspect of China. Now, I prefer the Christian moral fabric, but unfortunately, we have mostly erased that in most of the world. Social opprobrium as a result does not work very well. In China, the government comes, and then if that's the only institution left, then I don't know what else is there for except for the government to control the celebrities from encouraging people to behave in a perverted way. However, you can find shops of sex toys and tattoo parlors very easily in China. They don't control private sex life. What you do in your bedroom is not, from what I see, is not controlled by China. What's that? Okay, I can respond to that a bit later. Okay, they have no one-child policy anymore. That was 30. Yeah, but 30 years back, I can go back 100 years back and talk about World War I and World War II, and the crazy things happened. So I'm talking about China of today. The crazy things happened. Agree? Yeah, sure. There's more nuance to it. Most minorities did not have that restriction at all. Yeah, The Western media won't tell you about it. Let me complete myself. I know I'm running out, and I just want to conclude it, and then we can maybe respond to it when we do panel with Brian Lenny or privately with you. So they don't, and you can always nitpick on isolated issues. I actually think one child, you have to control populations of some of the third world hellholes. If you haven't been there, you don't understand what is happening. They are growing like cockroaches. Again, I'm not defending anything. I'm just portraying a picture of what I have experienced in China. Yes, the public display of sexuality is not approved in that country. And I'm very happy for it. I don't want to see people's genitals on the street in pride parades. And because I don't like it doesn't mean I'm homophobic. I just don't like it. It's not what should be done. Okay, I have to conclude very soon. What about Hong Kong and Taiwan? I spent many months in Hong Kong, and I had perfected information on when the next democracy protest would happen in Hong Kong. And I would be there, standing at the corner, watching that protests happening. They throwing bricks at police cars, blocking roads. I saw all that for months in Hong Kong. And I was a witness to a historical event. I was standing at the bottom of the most important Chinese flag in Hong Kong, outside the Chinese main government office. And one person climbed up the pole and brought down the flag and desecrated it right in front of me. I immediately left after that. I knew what was coming. And this whole escort teams came over 5 minutes later. So I did this. That was the only time I ran away from those protests. There were literally tens or maybe 100 flags of Australia, Canada, US, United Kingdom flying there. Canadians don't understand this, but not many countries would allow foreign flags to be flown within their jurisdictions. China allowed that until that last moment when I saw this democracy movement going, metastasizing, I would say. So again, I'm not in big favor of that democracy movement. I would have preferred Hong Kong to stay independent, but I would have preferred Nancy Pelosi kind of people not to agitate China. Really, from my experiences, China is one of the most open countries in the world. Until recently, India wasn't issuing visas to China. You can't fly direct from India to China, despite that they have connected borders. And China actually offers free gifts to Indians for applying for visas to China. And again, these visas happen very quickly. Now, really, visa policies are usually reciprocal. China does not follow a reciprocal policy. Virtually all of you can fly to China tomorrow without a need for visa. Chinese need a visa to come to your countries. They don't follow that reciprocal arrangement because they think in terms of what is good for you. This is what Maxime Bernier would say, that let them apply import duties. We don't care about them. And actually, my view is that Chinese would not have imposed any duty structure or export restrictions on Chinese goods had Trump not made a fuss about it. Because at the end of the day, China does not want to destabilize or delegitimize their government. Now, let me change the topic a bit and just to conclude this. For all its discipline and cohesion, China's rise is not self-generated. Chinese government doesn't want to hear that. The foundations of its prosperity were laid by extraordinary generosity from the West, above all, the United States. Without it, its trajectory would look very different. Without the West, nations like Japan, China, Korea, Singapore would still be mired in primitive conditions. The spring of humanity and civilization is the West, and its unmatched intellectual class, its raw liberty, openness, fixation on truth, individuality, and creativity. So at the end of the day, foundation of whatever China has achieved has come from the US and the West. still remember, copying is not easy. It is one of the most difficult jobs you can do. Do Chinese share that craving for liberty, for that? Do they have that vision for the unknown? Do they have that near religious belief in freedom, particularly which America embodies? I don't think so. But such a spirit is not necessary for economic growth, at least not for economic growth. This influences their institutions. Those expecting American-style equality would be shocked in China. Chinese structure, because of the way they have come to exist. And there's a concept called 0 to 1 and 1 to n. 0 to 1 means philosophy, ideas, basic science, creativity, which is the realm of the West. But then there's the realm of 1 to n, which is the realm of perfecting those ideas and creating technology and products. That is the realm of China and Japan and Singapore. Now, the interesting thing is that you should not expect American-style equality in China. They suppress creativity. They impose a strong peer pressure. Do I work for a Chinese company? No, sorry. They become emotionally constipated. We all people from outside the Western world are deeply emotionally constipated. I was talking with Darcy this afternoon. I was telling him that I still feel, despite having lived in the West for 30 years, I still feel sometimes this cloudy, unknown wave of anxiety hit me, which comes from this scars that are left from the hellhole I grew up in. So emotional constipation is a big problem. And then they'd want to take corrective actions by sending the children to corrective institutions to infuse creativity and innovation in them. Sorry, that's not how it works. But really, ladies and gentlemen, it makes no sense to compare China with the US. You should be comparing China with Kenya, Uganda, or India, because that's the group it belonged to 2 or 3 decades back. And that is why you should not be complaining about one-child policy when you can actually disappear in virtually all of these countries 20 years, 30 years back. Even today, I mean, in India, you can just disappear in no time. And so by that measure, China has done extraordinarily well. And there's really no true parallel in human history. I personally wish, when I visit the West and I visit China, I wish that they could work together in symbiosis rather than fight with each other. China is not the enemy of the West, and West is not the enemy of China. I think my instinct is that, and this is something I don't know because I don't see the back offices in Beijing, but I think that the most of the problem resides with Washington. They likely create more problems than Beijing would, because Beijing is not a democracy. They don't have to necessarily create a demagoguery, which Washington might want to do. Within East Asia, China may now be the most open-minded society in my view. Even more open-minded than I guess Singapore is. Even today, I think that's how open-minded Chinese might have become. And I would not be surprised if 0 to 1, the raw libertarian values might be starting to ignite in China. You might start seeing flickers of that already. And I would not be surprised because of the homogeneity, safety, and the institutional structure that Chinese have provided. Eventually, when the Western societies start getting into trouble because of the crazy things with bringing in third world people they have done, the higher IQ people of the West start leaving for Singapore, China, Japan, and Korea. And I think that will be what China already wants. They started issuing a special visa, K visa, which allows you to just move to China if you are well educated, you have a special qualification, and live there and see what happens with your life. They will not issue you citizenship, and no country should issue citizenship to foreigners, because then it leads to ethnic conflicts. My view is that Chinese trajectory is upwards. I meet people, every Chinese is paranoid. All intelligent people are paranoid. Chinese IQ is 105. I'm a big believer in IQ. I think Chinese IQ is the cornerstone. Their homogeneity ensures that there's harmony, and their homogeneity, the dispersion of IQ is low, which means that they don't have those 180 IQ people and they don't have the idiot IQ people either. But that reduces conflicts. I think China is here to stay, and I would not be surprised if China ends up becoming the next America. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much.